So from an earlier lesson, we went through and we looked at how you could invoke a Lambda, test it locally, and that is really powerful, especially one that you've imported. Another way to test Lambda functions, though, inside of Cloud9 is you can actually create one that talks to an API gateway, and you can test that locally. So you can test a serverless API using our Cloud9 environment. So to do that, we're going to go to this tab on the right, and we're going to select AWS Resources. Once I'm there, I can select new Lambda function, and it'll go through the wizard that allows us to create a new Lambda function locally. Inside of here, I'm going to call this function change me demo. And now I'm going to say next, select runtime Python 3.6. I'll select a empty Python function here. Now for function trigger, this is really the critical component. If you do want to test a local API, you're going to have to toggle this down to API gateway. Once I've done that, now I'll need to put in the correct route. So I'll type in change. And then for security, I'm going to say no security because I want to test this workflow without having to deal with, let's say, IAM roles. Now, I also will leave this default. I don't need to do anything. This is going to be a very simple Lambda function. Once that's been all set up, now I can create the structure on my local environment. Here's my change me demo folder that was created for me. And inside of here, there's a very simple stub that I'm going to swap out. So I'm going to throw some source code in here. And let's walk through what the source code does. So I first import a JSON library that's built into standard library of Python that allows me to handle JSON. I import the decimal library. And what this function is going to do is it's going to correctly return back change. So if I pass in a value of amount $1.37, it would first grab all the quarters that it could give me, then it would grab all the dimes, and it would grab all the nickels, and then all the pennies, right? So really typical process as a cashier would do. So this Lambda function, it starts out with the same Lambda handler. The event is going to be, again, the payload that's going to have the change amount that we're going to change. And here is a really important section, this if body and event. What this means is that I'm able to interpret that the API gateway itself was called, and the API gateway itself will show a body inside, and that's how I'm able to know that that pathway needs to be interpreted slightly different. So if I'm called from Python, I don't need to use this, but if I'm called from an API gateway, I go through this code path and I load the event in as JSON, and then I'm able to actually interpret that different route. From here, I go through and I put that value into an amount, and then here's the logic about making a change. And really, it's a greedy algorithm that pops off the remainder until eventually I can't give you any more coins. And then finally, the response comes back here as JSON, and it's returned back to the user. So a pretty simple and straightforward application. And then to test it locally, what we can do now is I can go back over to this change me section here and right-click on it. And here's another key step is you right-click, and there's a lot of different things you can do locally here, but what we're going to select is run, and then we're going to select run API gateway local. Now, it's worth pointing out that this is another really powerful feature of API gateway is you can also test functions remotely as well. In our case, because we've built this locally, we're going to test it locally. So I select run API gateway local, and now to test this, I'm going to have to select the correct HTTP verb. So I'm going to select post, and what post does that's different from get is that post will actually accept a JSON payload. Sometimes you'll see this too, where it'll get stuck for a second. If you ever have that, just toggle between tabs. So here I have the post method, and now I need to put in my payload, and we know from the source code that it's going to be looking for an amount. And then I'm going to have to pass in a string of some value. So again, let's just do $1.37. And if I select run on the left here, it's going to pass that JSON payload in, and then you can see that it returned back some kind of an error. So it's going to completely show me everything that's happening inside of my application so that I can go through and debug it. So let's go ahead and refresh this and rerun it again. So now if I go through and I again type in amount here, pass in our payload, go here, amounts, again, and we'll do $2.54. I again can go in and I can run this. Okay, so we ran into a internal service error here. So let's go ahead and see if we can figure out what's happening. Oh, here we go. The amount actually doesn't have a closing quote here. So if I change that, and now you can see it's now a turquoise color. If I say run, it's now going to go through and give us the access to the response. And the response here shows us a nice formatted payload that has 10 quarters, 4 pennies, and it's able to correctly make the change, and it's also able to show the content type as JSON. So again, a really powerful way to test web-based services locally inside your Cloud 9 environment. Let me also show you though, if I toggle here and I go to API Gateway Local, I can go to Lambda Local as well. And so I can now test this Lambda functions 2 different ways. So I also can just put a payload in here that's a basic payload. Let's just call this, I don't know, $1.39. And I can pass it in without having to do a post-based request. I can just give it a dictionary, and it also is able to test it and give me back the result. So in summary, what you're able to do here is actually toggle through the different environments from a Lambda local environment to a API gateway local environment, and it's all made available by right-clicking on the function and selecting this run icon. So a great and powerful interface here for developing serverless applications using Cloud 9.